Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. This is Project Kids number 36. It feels like it's been about 36 years since the last time I spoke with you, Uncle Mike. How are you doing this morning?
You never called me Uncle Mike before. So I think that is an indication of the lag between our time together that I have begun to turn into this character of Uncle Mike in your mind. Hopefully by the end of our show, I'm no longer Uncle Mike, but I'm your dear friend Michael. Well, but that being said, I am doing well, and it is wonderful to see your face and hear your voice. And Lawrence as well.
You are my dear friend Michael, but the some of the distortion that happens on the computer renders you looking like a cartoon character, right? And so for me, the name Uncle Mike goes along better with the cartoon character than with my dear friend Michael.
So that's not only is that completely fair, that is absolutely accurate, because I had this conversation with someone yesterday, someone who's really close with me, and they were referring to me. They were like, they were saying like my movements look cartoon character-esque. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And we had this whole conversation about me being a cartoon. And so when you say that, like, I don't quite get it, because I don't feel like a cartoon. I feel like actually almost a living, breathing human being. But maybe I'm not, that's in my blind spot. And there's more of a cartoon-esque quality to my existence than I'm willing to accept.
So I think, okay, so I mean, I guess I could see like a set of circumstances under which somebody would see you as a cartoon, especially because you make a cartoon version of yourself on a lot of your thumbnails and a lot of the still pieces that you put out. You don't animate them to move, right? But you've used them as representations for yourself in your work. So once somebody has seen someone represented in cartoon fashion, then they begin to look that way. And I know that for sure because our mutual friend, Juan from the One-on-One podcast, he has a comic book character of himself, right? And the more times I see that, the more he looks like that to me in real life, right? I don't know him as well as I know you. So his normal presentation isn't seared in my mind the way yours is. So when I see the cartoon and I see him, I'm like, yeah, I could see him as a cartoon character. Whereas for me, it's a little bit more, it's a little odd for me to be seeing and thinking of you as a cartoon character because I know you as you are. But I think the other thing the person could mean, I don't know who this person is, what their relationship is with you and whatnot. But you know, you have a shtick, as do I. And for people who enjoy or detest that shtick, it's usually one end or the other. It can become cartoonish, either in a way they like or in a way they don't like, right? But also you do a lot of one of the, like, think of someone like Jim Carrey, who's like a really good physical comedian, and actually someone else who's really good physically, though you wouldn't necessarily think it, and she's such a pain in the ass in every other way at this point, is Kathy Griffin. Have you ever seen Kathy Griffin walk like Paris Hilton?
No.
That is like one of the funniest things ever. She's like, she walks like a horse. Right. She walks like a horse. She walks like a tarantula. It's like a horse antula. And then she does this like Paris Hilton walk that is like exactly right. Dude.
All right. I'm gonna want to go and look at that.
Yeah,
and you're absolutely right. Like there is, because we talk about movement a lot. That's part of the things which we do. I do have a very and you've never seen me in like full body, like physical reality, but there's a way in which I like to move and I carry myself. And I'm immensely, and in martial arts, it's kind of I think it's called like drunken monkey. It's like this style of like where you're kind of, it's like you're on the edge of being out of physical control, but you never fully get out of control. And that's how I think I move a lot. And like, and what I do, and you'll probably find this interesting as someone who's very knowledgeable about like body awareness and movement, is I keep my center line really friggin' straight, but I have total like rubberiness with my arms and legs and hips. And so like it presents itself to someone who's like, it's unusual is the feedback I've been given. So that is cartoonesque. And I would imagine, like, as you're describing Jim Carrey and maybe Kathy Griffin, like other like performers, if you will, like they probably do something similar. But we're going to go a little bit deeper into the psychology of and the depths of the cartoon esque aspects, at least of me. And did you give me screen share capability? Not yet. So this image right here, this is probably the last of the collage pieces that I made when I did like 3 years of collage work. And I was talking about this to this person, and we're talking about how, like, when you create art, they are reflections of, you know, all the characters are somehow a reflection of yourself, just like in your dreams. Like, all your characters are also a reflection of you. And each one of these cartoon characters are a different part of me. And so that's where that conversation came, or like began. But then I was taking it a little bit further. Like, I was like, I really am like in embodying these different cartoon representations, which I've done of myself, and then like it goes full circle. So I don't know what exactly that means per se in terms of, like, you know, who and what I show myself as, but there certainly is, like, me as a cartoon, that line is certainly blurred.
It's called letting your MK Ultra alters run wild.
Girl,
I'm kidding. Right? Takes one to know.
Right?
No, I mean, I have like various iterations of myself that I wouldn't say that, like, oh, I intentionally put on this iteration of myself for these circumstances or that, but I'm aware, I notice that, like, in certain circumstances or around certain people, some more exaggerated version of some characteristic of my personality, like, begins to take over. And it's almost like intuitive. Like, whenever I see that person or go to that place or hear that sound or something, it brings that out, right? But the other thing with physical comedy is it can be very, some people are really put off by it, but for some people it's really endearing. Like, one of the things I know I can do to make Laura just like belly laugh is, like, I do these funny walks sometimes, right? And like, it's the most pure and uncontrolled laughter that she'll have when I'll like do some like cloud walking or some different kinds of like funny movements or something like that, right? And so like that physical comedy is something that, like, there's no risk of offending someone's sense of like political correctness or any of that kind of stuff, right? Like, physical comedy is something like a 3-year-old understands as well as a 90-year-old, and there's not usually, like, I mean, maybe we're getting to the point in society where everyone is so offended by everything that would begin to fall into that realm. But for the most part, that's why, like, circuses and clowns and things like that are generally pretty neutral territory. You don't hear a lot of like racial and other things being, and as long as they're not doing like midgets and stuff like that at the circus, like, everybody enjoys the circus, right? You know, so but what you were saying,
I can't stand the circus.
Yeah, me either. I think clowns are creepy.
And what's funny is if you go and you look at that collage, which I showed you a moment ago.
Circus master, the ring master.
Yes, and I think he's the most intriguing of all the characters in the entire thing. He's like hiding behind the tree, and he's like really well dressed, and he's got this kind of sad face on. And so, like, that to me, if I was someone viewing that, or if I'm looking at myself, I'm like, that's the most interesting character. And he was like, in my mind, he was very inspired by the person who leads the 3-ring circus. And then, like, you said, like, everyone loves the circus. I'm like, I like the circus.
When I say that everyone loves a circus, I don't really, unless it's Cirque du Soleil, which I see as more like a gymnastics or an acrobatic kind of thing. But like, I never liked really going to the Ringling Brothers or any of that shit when I was little. When I say everybody likes it, it's one of the few remaining things that isn't like so divisive and stratified in terms of, like, you know, when you're a kid, that's something all parents try with their kids. Oh, let's go to the circus. It's not for like this group of people or that group of people. Unfortunately, we're all exposed to the nonsense of the circus, right?
No, I don't want to go deep. I want to just put like a little asterisk, and maybe we'll come back to it. There's a movie called Paradise Alley. I think it came out like 2 years ago. Are you familiar with it by name?
No.
And it's Bradley Cooper starred in it. I want to say it was a Guillermo del Toro film, like, and it had a circus-esque quality to it, but was dark as can be. And that movie freaked that, like, it got into my psyche. Like, I was like, okay, I had to decompress a while after seeing that. And I saw that a week before that whole the whole Masonic thing that happened last January or two. Yeah, I guess it was last January. So like that, like now as we're like getting into like the circus as a motif. And then you brought up the idea of MK Ultra. You said like it just intuitively happens when I switch into these altars. I'm like, well, yeah, that's like the whole sort of, whether it's MK Ultra or not, like how we step into these other altars or characters, like they just happen naturally when the right trigger happens. And like when we experience it as the person who's playing the character, like we don't even realize it happens. We just do it. And to like ground this up completely is Paris Hilton has long been like a perfect example of like a MK Ultra-esque type of person. And, you know, whether it was her training at the Utah boarding school she went to, or just being like a Hilton sex kitten, it was like, you know, that the way that she has those physical qualities that tie into it. Like we're on to something there. I guess that's all I'm saying. We're on to something with that.
Absolutely. So I've not seen Paradise Alley, but another movie that I was talking about just this past week with Juan Ayala is The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, which is also like a circus kind of themed, but dark and sort of penetrating type of movie. If you haven't seen that, that one's kind of interesting as well. But
it sounds very familiar. It sounds very familiar.
The movie that Heath Ledger died while he was filming that movie.
Yes.
It had to be, he was replaced by both Jude Law and Johnny Depp playing other iterations of his character.
Right. Jude Law and wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. But I wanted to say something about, the ringmaster, right? So the ringmaster is like, that's always been the character in the circus that most appealed to me. Also, when you go to the symphony, the conductor is the most appealing character. They get to have the stick. And to have the stick. The stick is the most important part. And this also gets into what we were talking about a few weeks back when we were looking at Parados and the design experience and the conductor and the symphony. There's something about, I mean, let's just say for the sake of discussion that that painting is just a representation of all of your altars, and the ringmaster is kind of standing there off to the side. Like if we talked to my friend Elisa, who I've been doing a lot of sort of shows kind of related to some of the material that we talk about here with her, but from her perspective, she would say that's the front altar. Like there's one altar that's in control kind of all the others, or speaks for some of the others, or represents the others, or kind of controls like that interaction between the other altars. Like that front altar is aware of the other ones, whereas the other ones are not necessarily aware of each other or of the front altar. Right. Or even that they are altars kind of thing. So, yes, that's my favorite character in that collage as well, is the ringmaster. I like hats. I like hats, and I like sticks, and I like boots. Right. And so,
and costumes. I
don't know that I care that much about costumes. Like I'm not really a costume person, but I do like hats, boots, and sticks for sure.
Which make up a costume. So I use costume. I use costume in a very broad sense, not necessarily like always over the top. The analysis you just said of like the ringmaster, like that completely, like that makes total sense. And to look at that picture, you'll see that there are layers. There's like a character who's front and center, who's then attached to another character who's like in the middle, who is then behind them is the ringmaster. And so it's like the ringmaster is ruling, like is aware, just like what you're saying, but like completely behind the scenes, 2 layers behind the scenes. So there's like, there's something really interesting with that. And if you're knowledgeable of the model behind why neuro-linguistic programming works, particularly when one is using neuro-linguistic programming to understand their own inner world as opposed to using neurolinguistic programming to control other human beings, because it can be used either way. There's like that, what they would call the executive center, like that one kind of like alter which controls it all, that's aware of it all. So it's like we're talking about that same thing, the same idea of like getting to that controlling alter. And I would even go and say, like, if we want to go and lean into the science behind MK Ultra or any type of like handler type of relationship between a human being and someone else, is like that handler has control of the other person's ringmaster. And like that's how they're able to do have their control over all of the different alters.
The ringmaster is like the satellite inside the mind for the handler outside, right? So it's like the geotag or the satellite that
right
connection with, and then right, it's two.
And a human being who has not been under the influence of a handler, and that handler could be like not from a specific process, like you were like in an underground facility and you went through all of that, or you were just raised and you had like a domineering parent or sister or someone like that who was controlling, a human being who does not have a handler, like they have greater control over their ringmaster. But the person who's had that that experience in an early age where someone else took control of the ringmaster, that is where things get a little bit like dicey. But I also think that's where the magic lies too.
I'm absolutely. I mean, I was talking about this when I was on the Melt with Hunter and Chris about like, while I'm absolutely emphatically not for things being done to people without their consent or even outside of their awareness, there's a part of me that is like, this shit is not boring. This is interesting, right? Like I have an interesting life. And the fact that I've had some experiences that maybe are a little bizarre, or disturbing, or feel like they were somewhat out of my front and center, I am Emily awareness or ability to control. While there's a part of me that is somewhat disturbed by that, if the payoff for that is that I have an interesting life rather than a boring life, then I'm kind of, I have a level of appreciation for these experiences that I've had that it's taken me a while to come to, right? But that I certainly would not, I wouldn't change them in hindsight now. Like everything is exactly as it should be, because this shit is not boring.
Exactly. There's an absolute truth with that. Like we could, like there's a risk, like there's this risk dance, this risk excitement, like it's that comes along with having this type of internal structure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's the dance between that, right? It's like the being unsettled and then the being excited, and then all those things are true. So, all right. Well, now that we've sorted out the role of the ringmaster and which circus he's playing in, what have you been up to, my friend? Like we were saying, I think it's been 5 weeks, because I think when we did our January show, it was a week earlier in the month than we are meeting now. So I think it has been 5 weeks, but it seems like really long.
Yeah. In many ways, I would say my life has been really isolated and slow. Like I live in an area which I don't know a lot of people here. There's not a lot necessarily to do, but it's also immensely interesting. And I know that I have a strange connection to this land. And the land itself is what I've heard people around here describe as ancestral landscape, meaning like it really hasn't been touched by the modern world. And so in this, like probably past 5 weeks, I feel like particularly over the past year, like this past year of like living in Baltimore and then living in Nome countryside and then coming here. Well, prior to coming here, like it's been, yes, I've been in different situations, but there's been a lot of like stirring things up and there's been no settling. Like imagine like almost like a snow globe. And my 5 weeks here has very much been like things are beginning to settle, and it's settling in such a way that it is not influenced, or it's much less influenced by the external world, which I've always lived in, like the people I know, the places I would go to, the sort of things which I'd be exposed to. And it's, in certain ways, it's been boring. Like, I think we both like a little bit, we like some action. But then on the other hand, it's been really kind of settled, or like it's settling and solidifying. So there's not really that much to talk about. I've done a lot into looking at like internal stories and really leaning into like all of the starboard natural astrology and what I think that means and where I'm finding myself in what I want to do going forward. I'm leaving for, I think in the second week of March, I'm going to start another 20-day trip down through the Southeast. Again, I'll be going down to Florida, moving around and doing that. So I feel like, okay, that's going to be the next step. So that's what this time has really been, is like an opportunity to be away from maybe who and what I have been, to allow this other stuff to really come to the surface.
Yeah, it's been a long time since you lived in a place that was like kind of your own. You've been basically like camping out or living amongst a lot of, when I say camp, yeah, you've been camping out some, you've been sleeping in your car, but also you've been going to like staying at other people's homes and in spaces that they have provided, or in your small area of a space with a lot of other people. And so there isn't the opportunity for quiet or boredom on some level, just because there's always the general chaos of a lot of people coming and going, which can be boring in a way, but it's like a different kind of thing. I think that is one of the, as we sort of, look internally and sort of take inventory of all the characters or the authors on the inside, and be away from other people's either expectations of us, or even like whatever they do that stimulates us to be a certain way in their presence, even though like that might not be any expectation on their part. Then we can really start to like take inventory of how do I actually like to live? How much exposure to those external things that you're talking about, right? Because I'm very well aware of, I like action, and I even like a lot of action, but there's there's a line where like I'm done with that action, and I don't want anyone to talk to me. Like, I just want to be quiet. I want to do my own thing. I don't want to be married to a schedule or a commitment of being here or there, or having to meet up with these people or that people. And it's hard when you're just going from one of those interactions to another one, to like, even though in between you might feel like annoyed that like, hey, I don't really want to see this person, or it might not even be that you don't really want to see this person. It's that process of bouncing from one to another sort of external touch point that comes with its own set of expectations or requirements or whatever, that it's hard to sort of identify, like, how are you actually feeling, and what is it that you actually prefer or want or like or need or whatnot. And then when you're away, like oftentimes I'll be like, oh, I just need to like get away. I want to go somewhere where I don't know anybody and there's not a lot of stimulation. And then I'll be there and become bored pretty quickly, right? So it isn't quite exactly that I want to be so isolated from everyone else. But until I got to have that experience, I was sure that that's what it was. But then once I recognize, okay, well, now I'm away from everything, but I feel bored, like then I can start thinking clearly about what is it about all that external stuff that is the part that doesn't feel, that needs some sort of shifting or management or a better arrangement or whatever. and then finding that like, this is how much external exposure I like, and this is how much like internal, just sort of away from that I want, and which location provides the best scenario for that with me, which relationships, which work, which activities, all of that kind of stuff. And I think I don't think we're ever, I think this is the age that you and I are at right now, where we actually generally like start to really figure it out in a way that is honest and truthful. Like, I think when you're young, when you're in your 20s and 30s, like, even if you think you're introspective and insightful and thoughtful, which you may be, right? You just don't even have yet enough experience to know like what thing is actually making you feel what way, right? If you feel unsettled, you may think it's like the last thing that happened that made you feel unsettled, instead of understanding that like, no, it's really the thing that happened 3 or 5 things back. It's just that took that last thing to like set it off. So it really isn't that. Right. And it takes a level of like experience and enough times of certain things happening and observing other people and all of that stuff. So it's good. Like, sometimes having that quiet to sort of recognize, because sometimes I hear you, I've also heard you before, like, not want to have all that contact with the external world, even though you like it. Right. And only by removing yourself from it for a certain period of time can you go, okay, I like it, but I like it at this level. And how am I going to arrange my life? But also, like, sometimes there's things we want to do, but it takes a maturity and an honesty with oneself to know, I really want to do that. But if I do that today, that's going to push me that one step too far into that place where then I become annoyed with everyone else and everything else that it really has nothing to do with. Right. And sometimes saying no to that thing that seems really appealing at the moment, or seems like, well, I could just do that. It wouldn't be that big a deal and it would make that person happy. Right. But the consequence for that is long lasting and affects everything else. And so making that decision, which might be uncomfortable or not exactly what you want in the moment, ends up being, making everything else better for a longer period of time.
Certainly. And like, and just to like add one layer, you're absolutely right. The past year, I didn't even think about it this way. I never had any like home life stability. Like, I didn't have my own kitchen. Or like the bathroom didn't have hot water, or it didn't work, like all of these different things. And this is a combination of away from everything, which I knew, plus with like an immense, like I'm living on a farm, and like I have the house, and I have this really kind of like strange old fashioned home life right now. And that feels like really kind of like it's comfortable. It's like, oh, I haven't had this for a while. And that has been a grounding of just being able to settle into it. But this is where I keep, I'm still me. I still like see the world through the lens in which I see things. And so last night, one of the things which I've been doing are these regular meetups with the Star Board and practicing natural astrology. And we're calling it the Fellowship of the Board. Okay. And last night, and I
like how it sounds all like an organizational hierarchy, even though like that isn't
totally
what
like exactly. I mean, the whole thing is so, and I'm recognizing, we talked about this before, like there's this like despite all of this like randomness of where I am, I keep finding this very, very like solid, like I'm connected to this. Like on one level, like my 8 times grandfather lived where I am. Like I've never been here before. And I just found out recently that this was the land. So here's another example of like this strangeness of like the past keeps on showing itself to me in these like really kind of like interesting synchromistic ways. So we do a Fellowship of the Boards last night, and that is both like an online thing, and then we're trying to also make it like on ground, like people come to it. So last night, 2 people I have not met before, hadn't even met on like online space, like people who just saw like the call out on a video, which I put out a week or so ago, and they came to it. And the first one was a woman who's never lived in this area. And this area is in the middle of friggin' nowhere. Like the population center might be 1,000 people. And she just happened to move here 7 months ago. And she's like, I can't believe this. I've been following you for 5 years. This is what she says to me. And then I hear that you've literally moved into this same small town, which I live in. Like that is kind of like an interesting, like just looking at the odds. So there was that. And then this other guy comes up, and she's probably, that woman I would say is probably maybe like in her late 30s, early 40s. She's that age. And then this other guy comes, and he's in his 20s, I would say. And he's recently found himself living in Lancaster County. And he recently just found out about my work. So he's been like catching up on some of the old videos. And I think he was drawn to it because now he's living in Lancaster, and like the Susquehanna mystery like spoke to him. There's some of like that. So the most recent video, which I did, I talked about where I grew up in Columbia, Maryland, and I made reference to the neighborhood. Columbia is very structured. They were made up of 9 different villages, and every village has 3 different neighborhoods. And so the neighborhood I grew up in was called Thunder Hill. And the reason why I brought that up in that video is because I was talking about coming back to this house and all of these connections to my like literal ancestry. And right up the street from where this farm is, where I'm staying, is this like tier 3 NASCAR track. Like where they do the NASCAR racing, but not like the fancy NASCAR, like minor league NASCAR. And it's called Thunder on the Hill. And I'm like, I think that's funny because there's Thunder Hill, and I talked all about this. And this dude is watching my video, and he's interested in it because of the Lancaster thing. And he's like, holy shit, I grew up in Thunder Hill, Columbia, Maryland as well. There might be 100 houses in, like, it's a small thing. So this guy grew up there, went to the same elementary school, which I went to. And so he came to the Fellowship of the Boards because he felt that calling. He was like, holy shit, like, you know, this talk about mystical, strange things. I'm in Lancaster. And now this guy also went to the same neighborhood where I grew up. And so like, we spent like the first half an hour just talking about like, I was like, oh, well, what about this place? We used to play football there. He's like, yeah, we played football there as well. And so like there's this I'm experiencing as I'm removing myself from all of my supposed experiential backgrounds, it keeps coming back up. Like, you know, that you can't really remove yourself. It's pulling, like, you know, those connections still exist, and they're gonna show themselves up in ways which are unexplainable. And there's one last thing I'm going to say before I stop is the primary road, which this area which I'm living in, which goes through it, it's called Route 100. If you're like familiar with the Philadelphia area or the eastern Pennsylvania, you might know Route 100. It's not particularly big. It's like a 2-lane highway, but Route 100 is the road which I would take. So if I'm going to go down south, if I'm going to go down to like maybe towards Philadelphia or something like that, I take 100. The second exit, or the second light, which I go through when I leave my area, is Moyer Drive. So every single time when I drive through it, like I'm thinking in my mind, like, you know, it doesn't need to be said, like because we go through this all the time. You pointed out like the Susquehanna, you see Susquehanna Drive or road in Austin. And I knew as soon as I moved in here, I'm like, well, there's Moyer Drive. Of course, this is where I'm going to be.
I did not see that Moyer part coming, so that's hilarious. But yeah, so what's interesting about what you just said, right? Like I've always been thinking about this a lot since I got past, like, you know, there's like layers of understanding and awakening and certain kinds of research that you do that go along with that. And at a certain point, you're into this like really deep digging through all the documents, blah, blah, blah kind of research. And then at a certain point, like you emerge from that, and you're like, okay, wow, I spent a lot of time doing that. And even if all of that stuff is like maybe true, the idea that like anyone or enough people is going to come to understand that it's going to make a difference or not, like, I don't know if that was a good use of time. Like, I'm glad that I know these things. And then you get to like this more simple way of seeing how things work. That's almost humorous, like almost hidden in plain sight, that you can glean as much information in just sort of like dancing around in those experiences as you did from the hours and hours of deep research. You know what I'm talking about here? Okay. Yeah. So this has been coming up a lot for me, like these ideas, these themes, like for you, you just said Thunder Hill or Thunder on the Hill, right? Like, let's just say that like we don't at all understand what this thing we're experiencing here in this realm actually is. And like, maybe it's like some sort of, like, have you ever been to like a laser tag facility or something like that? Like you have those rooms where kids go inside and you're playing laser tag and it's like a whole inside there, but then you go in and then you leave and it's a different, like maybe this realm is like that. Like maybe our parents are waiting for us outside right now. We've been in here doing this thing and it's very complex. But before we went in, we were given like a few terms that were key to our experience. And like, let's say for you, maybe one of them was Thunder Hill, maybe one was Moyer, maybe whatever, right? But we like, there might be a number of iterations of that before you land on the one that was like the thing you were looking for, right? Like maybe you just remember Thunder Hill, but maybe they really said Thunder on the Hill or whatever it is, right? But you will be magnetically drawn to things with that or a similar name or theme until you tap on the one, which is where you're going to find the golden egg or whatever it is, right? And it seems like, wow, this is like a fucking long time. Like that was when you were a little boy and this is when you're a man in your 50s or whatever. But if we're having some dilated experience of time and our parents are really still waiting for us outside of the laser tag, and maybe like in the scheme of things, we've only been inside for an hour, even though it seems like forever, right? Like we're trying to figure out the treasure hunt or the obstacle course or whatever it is, right? So like, here's a really simple one that is almost meaningless, right? Like when I got here to Austin, as ladies generally do, you have to find a hair salon, right? And we picked this one that felt like edgy and like my style, and it was called the Ron King Salon. And the first time,
Ron King Salon,
the Ron King Salon, and the first time
is it Ron King Salon? That's what where the name comes from. Is that a person?
It's a person. Yes, there is a Ron King who is kind of humor. He wasn't the person doing my hair, but he's a humorous person. And I had a conversation with him that was interesting one time. So I can at least appreciate the experience for that. The first time we went, we loved our hair. And then things got increasingly weird from there. And right. And so finally.
Weird as it relates to your hair or weird as it relates to life?
All of the stuff, all of the things.
All the stuff. Okay.
And at a certain point, we just decided this was not the place for us. But the person we found, who now, like, I really like my hair, her last name is also King, but it's a girl and it's not edgy and it's in an area of town that isn't hip or isn't cool or whatever, right? So I was obviously looking for King, right? But I just settled on the wrong King first, right? The Ron King was maybe the wrong King for me.
Okay, I see what you're saying now, yes.
Okay, so there's a lot of this. Like, it's funny how like we come up on something that reminds us of another thing that may have been a good or a bad experience. And then we have this moment of deciding whether we want to engage or not. But maybe it's the thing, like maybe we just got it wrong the first time, right? As you're trying to understand, if you watch detective shows, what clues mean, they get 2 or 3 wrong before they hit on the thing, but they're working from the same piece of evidence or the same little hint or clue or whatever it is. Now, when I did not see this Moyer Drive thing coming at all. And just so you know, we've talked about it on the show before, we too live near a NASCAR, but we live near a fancy one, a Formula One, I think it is, right? Formula One. So it's interesting.
Well, it would make sense. What Austin is to Bechtelsville.
Right.
It's probably like what Formula One is to like the miniature like race cars with like the thing on the top. So like it looks like a fan so it doesn't flip over. And I think it's a dirt track. Like it's literally a dirt track.
Okay. So listen, so you have Moyer there, you've got the racetrack and whatever. So remember when Vat City sent us that intersection of Susquehanna and Moyer? And
in Philadelphia, in Fishtown.
In Fishtown, right? Something fishy at the deli kind of thing, right? So there's actually this fantastic condo building right on the corner of those streets that like looks like exactly the kind of place I want to live in, right? And it's called the Moyer, right? It's literally called the Moyer, right? So there's all this funny stuff, but it's also, remember how it was near, like just a few blocks from that area in the Monkeys movie with 12 Monkeys or whatever with Bruce Willis. And we talked a lot about that. And, you know, and we came up with this idea that like, maybe we were there doing some sort of sitting in a circle ritual, but the idea being that Susquehanna and Moyer, was it there to like, does time work in a different way than we think it does? And is Susquehanna and Moyer commemoration of whatever it is you and I eventually achieve or have achieved or whatever it is, right? Or is that there to inspire all of this activity that you and I have been doing together, and to bring attention to that this clue matters and you're looking for certain iterations of it, right? Okay, so check this out. So Allison McDowell draws my attention to a topic, and I thought I knew what she meant, but I didn't exactly know what she meant. I was talking about, like, she started talking about cesium. And I'm like, oh, I'm focused on cesium heavily right now because I'm very, very focused in on sites where they're conducting nuclear fusion experiments, right? And cesium is part of that. So I'm like, well, okay, yeah, I'm already focused on it. Great. She's talking about a software company in the square, right in that area where you and I have talked about, just a few blocks back from Susquehanna and Moyer, in the area where 12, all that kind of stuff was. There's a software company that is like creating somehow, like in the virtual reality, the similar kind of experiences that like actual cesium and nuclear fusion, and in my head, like, you know, about Chatsworth or whatever, is creating, right? So she's pulling my attention to the same thing that is like a different iteration of the same idea, right? And it's right there in that spot near the Susquehanna in Moyer. And so the world has this way, or this ability, of generating whatever this reality generating machine we are in is. It creates iteration after iteration of the same idea and different ways of perceiving it or using it or whatever. The cesium company sounds quite a bit like, remember when we were looking at ThoughtWorks, like some of that kind of stuff. Remember the ThoughtWorks with the ridiculous mission statement?
Right.
But it's right there near the Susquehanna and Moyer. And then here you are. I had no idea you were going to say there was a Moyer Drive there. Like, I did not see that one coming. But what I was thinking about also before that is that you're in a place called Bechtelsville, right? And of course, there's this fantastic company that really helps the world called Bechtel. Are you familiar with it?
Of course I'm familiar. You think I haven't already delved down that road?
Right. So like one has to wonder, right? Is the idea for Bechtel somehow rooted in this Bechtelsville origination thing, and that part of the task that Bechtel, maybe in its most inner circles, like maybe not the profit making part of it, but like what they're really doing on the inside, that all the other stuff is generated to sort of hide or whatever, is to, you know, sort of track or follow some of these characters, players, and games in certain locations as they move through the inner laser tag of life. Right? Like Bechtel does like a wide variety of stuff, lots of it weird, most of it not good, on some level. But the further I get into all of this shit, whether we're talking about like Boeing, Raytheon, everything seems to be related to nuclear fusion, genetics, biologics, and things like that. Like there seems to be some desire to like track and activate things, and all these stories that they come up with in order to like collect genetic material or experiment on it is like some kind of facade or cover story for the fact that, like, you know, it's kind of that they're looking. It's kind of like you have a substance and you want to see which substance is going to make that one react and do this big thing. And so you're trying every chemical compound, dropping it. So like every person that cycles through anywhere like that, it's almost like they're on the hunt, right? Remember, I was talking about this with JJ and Nish in his show. In Dark, I don't know if you've gotten there yet. I don't know how far you've watched into it, but there we're dealing with nuclear fusion and genetics. And the character that is so strange, that is like observant of all the crazy stuff going on, but like not that participant of it himself, or to the extent he is, he obviously feels conflicted about it. His name is literally Doppler. What is a Doppler? It's a radar that tracks certain things, right? So there's this desire to track the interaction of sort of energy, creating compounds, elements, items, people, beings, whatever it is, right? So I'm thinking about like, you're in Bechtelsville, right? And that's where sort of the emanation of the Bechtel entity sort of comes from. And they're charged with sort of like creating a game board out there that whatever that creates scenarios for characters to come into, in which they can be monitored, tracked, traced, to sort of created a dossier on about that is really about something way different than what we would think it's about, right? Like there's all of this idea of like criminality and terrorism and all of this kind of stuff. And all of that provides like perfect cover for like, what's the energy field of this? We've talked about this before in terms of trafficking. What's the energy field of this person? And what happens when we put them here, when we put them here, when we put them here, when we put them with this person, when we show them this, when we do this, when we do that, blah, 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 right? Like everything is just this gigantic obstacle course or testing field to see what happens when you do this, when you do this, when you do this, right? And Bechtelsville, for you, like, I wonder how long Moyer Drive has been there. It would be fascinating if that was like one of the earlier named streets there, because then that puts a connection between my family and yours at this very important starting point in the United States.
Well, the Moyer name comes is your line that goes through Scranton, correct?
Yes.
All right. So there's Scranton is probably like maybe an hour or two from here, maybe a little bit further. I'm not certain, but certainly there's like a literal overlap like in this part of Pennsylvania. I'm not certain when the first Moyer came through Scranton, but regardless, but where I want to go with this, which I think is I just like to throw it out there is so when I looked into Bechtel, right? Because, well, one thing is I saw that going back and looking at my own family line, there was like the first one and he had 19 children. And one of those 19 children married one of the Bechtels, who Bechtelsville is named after. So like there's like, so like that wasn't like the direct, that would have been a great uncle for me because he wasn't, that's not this exact linear line I came through. But anyway, so there was that. If you go and you look at the history of Bechtel, and Bechtel is like, I mean, it's one of the largest military industrial complex contractors, and they are headquartered in Reston. We've talked about Reston many times. Reston is where they're all or many of them are headquartered, so that makes sense. But you go and you look at the guy, and you follow his history. The patriarch who started the Bechtel Corporation, and still a family-owned business. He's got a connection to I want to say he came through like Oklahoma, maybe Texas a little bit. And I did a little bit of research. So his father was from the Ohio area, and then his father came from Lancaster. So we can go and see like this Bechtel, like I couldn't go any further than that, but there does seem to be like an epicenter where these like at least DNA lines, because you're saying like they're all trying to get genetic material, like there is tied to this sort of space, this area, this physical location, for whatever that may mean. If you go and you look at the background of where you could see it says the CEO, Brendan Bechtel, you'll see that he is the head of the Business Roundtable Group, and you'll see that he looks strangely like, who's that talk show? He looks like that one picture looks like the sidekick of, was it Conan O'Brien?
I'm not sure because I never watched it, but yes, he does.
I've never watched it. He's got a sidekick named Andy.
Look. Yeah.
But he looks like that. But anyway, Peter Bechtel is also the head of what's called the Business Roundtable Group. Do you know what the Business Roundtable Group is?
Yes.
Like that's one of those organizations that like sets the infrastructure, which then creates like the unfolding of how life is lived in at least America. So it's like a highly, highly, highly influential person.
So this, just even here in this like top listing right here, Bechtel, and engineering, construction, and project management. Like they're stating out in the open what they do, but people have a very specific idea of what they think about when they think about engineering, construction, and project management. And I'm saying there's other iterations that those words explain that is more clearly what they're doing. And they're telling you,
totally.
They're just hiding it right there in plain sight. Like, I don't need to do more research. You used to work in Reston. We've had that conversation. Like, this is obviously, this is what they're part of what they're charged with is, managing the activities around the scaffolding of the structure of reality that's been created for us to wander around in, i.e. they're the project managers of the laser tag facility or whatever it is, right? So
And it works just that simple. Like when I say it, like how we're having our life experience, like there are literally organizations that are connected to certain spaces of or locations, land, and family lines, and they create the stage in which then life unfolds. And most people are unaware they're even on stage. Like these scaffoldings are created for them. These Potemkin villages.
Correct. Oh, Laura, love you. You said Potemkin. All right.
I threw it out for her.
So, okay, if you just go to their Twitter feed here, their first, the two things that are the most prominent in their Twitter feed right now, the most recent one is 4 hours ago. Our infrastructure leader chaired today's energy security session at Energy Institute, thanks to Crystal Energy, for a lively debate covering geopolitics, energy mix. They're here to manage energy. And people are thinking, of course, we have gas and we have coal, and I'll get to the coal in a second. But like, what about the energy of the beings that reside here, right? And again, reference to dark. And then this other one from 16 hours ago is also about energy security, but they have spelled energy security wrong. But I don't know if it's really a mistake. Energy secrutity. What the fuck is energy secrutity? Right? Maybe
what about just the word secrutity? Is that a word?
Let's check and see. Let's look it up. Secrutity. No, so it's a mistake, but it's like, wow, they don't have somebody that runs their checks their fucking shit before they post, right? Like,
right, exactly. Like they pay someone like probably like a $200,000 salary whose job it is for the public relation image to not make that mistake.
Right.
And they're probably very good at doing that. So the fact that it's like a typo, like it's no typo. And then I want to just add this in because I just had this conversation a week ago. And it was about how in like the mid 90s within the business scape, it became the norm to invent words that have no meaning for business names. So like the most obvious one we know is Verizon. Like that is not a word. Like Verizon is made up. It used to be called Bell Atlantic. The company we now think of as Verizon used to be called Bell Atlantic. And they went through this thing and they magically changed it. They took like Vision and Horizon, and now we're Verizon, and Zion's in it. Like Lexus is a made up word between luxury and sex. And so there's this idea of like maybe even like spoken Kabbalah. That's kind of what we're talking about, of like introducing these like new words to like reframe people's minds of like whatever these organizations are, though nothing ever changes. And what is the word? Security? Secrutity, like secretion,
right? Well, this is like, if you're looking for certain energy fields in people's biological materials, sure, there you go. So, but it can also be steganography, right? Like if somebody's looking for a Twitter post from Bechtel that has a coded message, it's going to be the one with the spelling error. They'll know that there's some pattern in there for them to read, right? That's the only way that makes sense. Because whoever their social media person is paid for their yearly job, probably more than I've made in my lifetime so far. And like, really?
Right. Okay. Exactly. It makes more sense. It was done on purpose. So the question is like, for what reason? Like, what is being happening here? You're absolutely, and like, yeah. Okay.
And one more thing before we wrap up the public segment and go into the patron segment, which I have something fascinating that I want to share with you. But it's a little private type. So you heard yesterday's made news, didn't you?
No.
That the Department of Energy has decided now that they believe it was a lab leak, right? So one starts to wonder, like, why does what the Department of Energy thinks about...
Hold on, what's a lab leak?
The fucking COVID shit.
Oh, okay.
Right? And there's this weird articles where it's like, okay, well, the Department of Energy has decided that they now agree with the FBI that it's a lab leak, but for a different reason. And they have a low level of confidence in this decision, but it is their decision. So everyone's like, oh, like the people who like to jump on and with any they chase after any bone that gets thrown them or whatever is like, yay, see, they're finally admitting it was a lab leak. The conspiracy, no, it wasn't a lab leak, right? Then there's the deeper question is, what the fuck does the Department of Energy have to do with this, right? So there's all these, they in their own statement start saying, oh no, it's normal for us to be concerned with this. We were out ahead of the anthrax situation. Now, all of these things that they're talking about, what does the Department of Energy have anything to do with biologics? Well, to my point about why are they always collecting genetics at places where they're doing nuclear fusion, right? So and then the anthrax part, it was funny. I did a conspiracy dump with Jeff the other day in a conspiracy cocktail where like we were talking about how many strange things the anthrax situation is connected to. And we were talking about the 1996 Centennial Park bombing at the Olympics, and we got into some weird stuff. And I found this really weird paper, which I still haven't even had a chance to read, that was like talking about like the character of anthrax. Like it was very bizarre. But somebody sent me
the character of anthrax.
Right. Like there's something weird going on with all this anthrax shit. There always has been. This paper comes from UCLA, which is even more fascinating for me personally, maybe not for everyone else, but I haven't had a chance to study it the way I really need to. But our good friend Chris Miner pointed out that like yesterday's story covered all these things that I have been fixated on for the last couple of weeks, right? And I've had this situation with the Department of Energy before where I started noticing something funny was going on in the fusion world. And then all of a sudden later that day, they announced that they had achieved nuclear fusion. There seems to be, even if it's just synchronistic or coincidental, however you choose to think of it, right? There seems to be this thing. So I'm talking about this shit and going on and on about it, which seems like a funny topic for a conspiracy cocktail. But okay. And then this story comes out this week that involves all of these things, right? So anthrax, someone sent me, I think maybe it was even Chris, there is some previous like Greek iteration of the word anthrax that literally means coal. So then I started to think anthracite, right? Because anthracite sounds like anthrax. And
right.
So I was going back and forth with Chris Miner, and he's doing some research and stuff as well. But I couldn't sleep last night. Like I woke up in the middle of the night and I was congested, right? So we come outside to the couch, and I just was like, normally if I can't sleep, I will like put on some podcast that I think is boring and I'll fall right asleep, right? But I didn't. I felt like I was looking for something. So I went and I combined the words Department of Energy lab leak and anthrax. And I found an interesting article that sends you right back to Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, which is where when I went on and on about nuclear fusion, then the announcement came from Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, right? Now, and this whole thing about they have this secret division called the Z division that has always been working on biologics and chemical warfare and all of that kind of stuff. And, collecting genetics and into DNA. And they created some thing that was like some weird box PCR test during the anthrax thing, like literally doing exactly what I'm saying, going into areas and picking up all the genetic material that they can and testing to see what they see. Right. So it was like, that was what woke me up. Like the symptom was congestion. Right. But no, this article was like from a website that I would not normally look at. And it only came about with the combination of these particular words. Right. So anthrax is code for something else. Anthrax attacks means something different than what people think it means, though it also means that, just like what we're talking about here. There's the accepted meaning for something and there's something else. How is it that there's another, we think of anthrax as like some poison that people send in the mail, right? Some toxin that affects humans that people send in the mail. We've never heard that anthrax is coal. And then there's this very particular kind of anthracite that comes from the area that we're speaking of right here, that is the cleanest burning coal, that also is the separate the wheat and the chaff or whatever, maybe it's all good stuff, but there's the Herkimer diamond and the anthracite. So this is like probably the most successful version of fission that's ever been achieved. It created two valuable commodities. Like oftentimes when it's fission, you're just destroying everything, right? So we have fission and we have fusion, right? And we're definitely like something has shifted in the last little bit where they seem more interested in energy created by fusion than by fission, which they used to really be much more interested in the atom bomb. They were more interested in fission. But to my mind, anthracite and Herkimer diamonds are like probably the most beneficial or productive. There was even a thing in that Bechtel thing that one of the companies was called Crystal Energy. Like, have we ever thought about Herkimer diamonds as an energy source? Like, I wonder if they are an energy source. We think of them as a storage, right? Like that crystals can hold information and stuff like that. But to me, all of this story is like code for like a million other things, the least of which is the thing that they say it's about.
Okay. We got a couple minutes before we go into the so just a quick like reflection back on that. If I recall correctly, like in 2020, so back when it first was coming out, Whitney Webb did an article linking together anthrax, the lab leak virus, and it was based around research from a Pennsylvania university. It was University of Pittsburgh. So like now we've got like both sides of involved, and Pittsburgh is it's not anthracite, but it is certainly a coal built town.
Well, it's also where one of the first casualties of like the COVID truthers happened. Remember that weird story, that Asian guy? Remember that we talked about it on the show, like the Asian guy who got killed, who was like saying that the code, the biological code, the computer code that was a COVID. Remember that? There was like some weird.
Right. Yes, I do.
Okay, but also the thing that got me looking on a real world level, I was already looking at in the imaginal world from dark, right? But the thing that got me looking at why are they doing genetic collection at the same locations that they're doing nuclear fusion was a Whitney Webb interview where she talked about this technology called thinking machines. Right.
Okay.
Right. So it's interesting. So we have a web here. Right. We have some sort of connective tissue going on here. But I love that you weren't even aware of this story yesterday, because it's like one of these. This is what my friend Les Luthor would call like basically chicken feed. Right. This is going to keep a lot of people busy for like a really long time. And not getting to like what the steganography is of the code that they're sending out to like the people in the know who are working on sub-project B, C, D, whatever, right? So,
anyway. And what's happening just as like a cultural observation is, and this goes without saying, but I just want to say it. It goes without saying because it's obvious, but I still want to say it. The lag, the amount of time from like a modus operandi or like this being a fake story and then everyone like, oh, it's a fake story, like is getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. Like when they talk about the singularity, when they talk about time speeding up, like that's one of the measurements of like the fact that people are catching on to the fact that story isn't what you think that story is.
Yeah, I mean, people
are getting shorter and shorter.
Understand how to read the code, and in fact, it's getting to the point where like we're decoding it before they even put the story out, and then they have to put the story out to distract from the decoding that was already done.
Right. And this is, and what's funny is like, so you mentioned a little bit earlier, this idea of like iteration of iteration of iteration. Like, it's like, and when you're saying that, I'm thinking of like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. And it starts to like break down, like when you're like 4 standard deviations away. But then what another way of thinking about that is like what you're saying is now the iteration or the stories, the false stories or explanations are having to come faster and faster and are more and more ridiculous because that lag is getting shorter and shorter. And that spins off all of this like kind of like ridiculousness. And like, don't get caught up in that. Like, and this is where it's all NASCAR, like, because NASCAR is based upon like being able to get into these pockets of air and like to have your car pulled forward. Like we're seeing these pockets of energy being spun off of just stories. All they are fucking stories for people's brains to go into.
And those distortions that happen with the copy of the copy of the copy, for some reason, are really exotic and sexy. So people get lost in there for a long time and forget that the code words on the way in were simply Thunder, Hill, and Moyer. Stay focused on that. And right, kind of.
All right. So do we want to do a little, like I have a couple of images. I just want to show you the Moyer Drive and where it's located for the map form, or do we want to do that on the back on the second half?
Let's do that on the back end. So let's wrap up the public section. You guys can go to patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, projectkids.locals.com, or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. I try and give people as many options as they want. Michael, I think your website is back up and you're offering services again. Is that correct? What would you like?
Kinda, yeah. Like go to Susquehanna Alchemy, where what I'm really focusing my energy right now is literally, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more later, is like I am for what we're talking about, this whole idea of iteration, and all of that sort of stuff. I'm teaching people how to collapse false timelines. And that is not like a ridiculous notion. That's a very practical thing. Like once you understand what false time is and what false timeline is and how to move your consciousness out of it so you're no longer following like it just happens naturally. That's the sort of stuff which I'm dealing with right now and working with. And if that speaks to someone, I mean, this is understanding the difference between natural time, real time, and then how to make that part of your practical experiential reality. Like hit me up on that. That's the sort of stuff where I'm going right now.
Well, that goes perfectly with what we've just talked about, right? Staying focused on like the few pieces that are important. And like, I think what happens sometimes, okay, someone's working with the clues, Thunderhill and Moyer, and they get so far off into some deep research that they're into something fascinating, but it no longer connects in any way to what the initial thread was, and they have just created a false timeline. So it goes with, right? Like, especially if they spend a lot of time there, it gets extended out really, really far.
Right.
You get very committed to that, and the desire to collapse that becomes less and less and less the farther out you go, but you're getting farther and farther and farther from what that route was. So that's fascinating. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll see you on the other side.